So our first panel today will discuss federal regulatory implications for carbon capture, utilization, and storage technologies. Regulatory factors such as 45Q, leasing, and permitting for carbon storage pose challenges and create opportunities for different facets of CCUS development and deployment. Today's panelists will discuss these barriers and explore potential policy solutions. I'd like to now welcome Randall Luthi, Chief Energy Officer for Governor Gordon here in Wyoming, who will introduce today's panelists and moderate the session. Randall, all yours.
Thank you very much, Jack, and thank you all for attending, and above all, thank to the panelists who agreed to be part of this discussion. I'm in the unique situation where I didn't tell them anything about what I'm going to ask them, so it should be a nice surprise for many of them, I hope, just so they can't ask me questions in return. But first of all, got a great panel lined up. And I'm going to ask each of them to take just a moment or two to introduce themselves, and then we'll go with some general comments. And I'd like this to be also somewhat interactive as much as we can. If something, really sparks your interest there in the audience, just raise your hand, stand up, yell, and see if we can't get some discussion and answer for things you're asking or would like to know. So with that, as we go down there again to my left, we have Todd Parfit, Matt Fry, Tanya Rigetti, and Steve Fussier. And I practiced, right, for at least a minute on that to hopefully get that right. So again, thank you all very much. But Todd, if you would set the stage for what a short introduction is like, we'll go for it.
Thank you, Randall. And it's great to be here. So thanks to the Western Governors Association for taking on this topic. So I'm Todd Parfit. I'm the director of the Department of Environmental Quality here in Wyoming. And we, as had been mentioned earlier, are the second state to obtain primacy for the Class 6 UIC program. Is that short enough, or would you like me to...
Well done, Director Parfit. Matt.
That's a high bar. My name is Matt Fry. I'm a senior policy manager at the Great Plains Institute. I live and work in Wyoming, been here about 20 years despite the southern accent. Had the opportunity to work on these CCUS and carbon management issues for 15 or so years. Thanks for having us, and I look forward to the conversation.
Hi, I'm Tara Rigetti. I'm the Occidental Chair of Energy and Environmental Policy at the University of Wyoming, and I also co-direct our Nuclear Energy Research Center. I'm originally from California, and I've been in Wyoming now for about 9 years.
Hello, I'm Stephen Fusier, or Fusilier, depending on whether you want to do French or English. And I'm a South Louisiana Cajun who's lived most of my life in the West. Started with the BLM late in life, been a BLM relative specialist since 1999, and I managed the right-of-way program for the headquarters of the Bureau of Land Management.
Well, very much again. An assistant secretary really kicked this off nicely. You have that entire continuum. You've got to be able to find CO2, develop CO2, but before companies are going to be really interested in doing that, they've got to make sure there's either a market or a place for it. So Director Parfit, would you take just a few minutes and explain, what is Wyoming's, what is Class 6, how does this process work, why are we doing it, and what are some advantages? All within a minute, if you could. I'm kidding.
All right. Well, thanks for those questions. So with the Class 6 underground injection control program is one of several programs under the federal underground injection control program. And Wyoming has had primacy for the other components or other classes of UIC since the 80s. So we've been doing this a long time. There's Class 1 wells, Class 2. So Class 1 is commercial deep well injection for typically waste materials. Class 2 is something that's regulated by the Oil and Gas Commission. Class 3 would be for recovery of minerals, and that's regulated through our land quality division. Class 4's UIC wells are for disposal of hazardous waste. Those are no longer allowed. And then Class 5 are your traditional ones that you would see, the most common type of discharges for septic system leach fields and that kind of thing. And then Class 6 is relatively new. We became a primacy state, I think it was back in 2020, but it took quite a long time to get that primacy package approved. And we started as a state looking at carbon sequestration back in around 2008 and created some foundational legislation that helped us move quickly through the process once that was established. And such things as who owns the pore space, and solving that question early on so that as we proceed now with the permitting process, that question is already answered. And in some other states that may not be the case. So why that's important, just as the Assistant Secretary Crabtree had mentioned, although I have to update my numbers, but he mentioned that there are roughly 150 applications with EPA for Class 6 permitting. And my numbers from at the time were 76 Class 6 permits with EPA for consideration in different regions around the country. And that's now up, I guess, to around 150. But of those 76 at the time, 2 of them have been issued by EPA, and it took nearly 6 years for those permits to be approved by EPA. Whereas in Wyoming, what we're looking at is, and there are 2 parts to the permit. The first part is the construction. So there's a permit to construct, and then there's a modification that will occur, which would be for the injection itself. Combined, that process will take Wyoming about 1.5 years. So from a timing standpoint, it's really important that the state has primacy in one of the key components.
Thank you very much. This is a Western States initiative. You can't be in the West and not be heavily involved with the federal government because of the land ownership issue. So the Bureau of Land Management plays a key role in whatever types of sequestration projects we will be able to develop. So Stephen, would you take a few minutes and explain the BLM process, how they're going about permitting? I believe you are using rights of way, and just let us know what the BLM is again, the outline of their program and where you expect to go.
BLM has tried to be a very proactive agency with regard to carbon sequestration. Our first policy was in 2012, and it related to site characterization and studies related to the feasibility of carbon sequestration. That went on through 22, and during that time we had no applications. Back in late 21, early 22, we began to look at the need to come up with a policy related to how could we actually store carbon within BLM management plans. And because we wanted to be very proactive in this area, we developed a policy that should be through a right of way so that all the related facilities, pipelines, communication facilities, things like that, could all be issued under the same process. And so BLM decided, working with us solicitors, that our regulations actually give us the authority to do that already. Many of you come up as we go through this process with regulations to describe certain characteristics of that as we learn more about it. Like I said, we've been trying to be very proactive. We have issued one carbon sequestration project that was part of an dense oil field recovery project. ExxonMobil, Wyoming has a project that was authorized earlier this year under Class 2. Currently, BLM has 8 active applications for carbon sequestration in the West, 4 in Wyoming, 1 in Montana, 1 in Colorado, and 2 in Mexico. We have at least 3 other projects that we're talking to. So you can see we're trying to get moving on this process. We work very closely between the right-of-way division, our branch, and the actual and tenure and land right-of-way division and the oil and gas division, so that we are very cognizant of what is going on with port space. We are proposing proposals to store carbon. We have one policy, our first policy on carbon sequestration, and directly related to the right of way and how to go about the process. In 22, we have another policy that we're in the development stages of that are actually some of the questions that came up as we've been going through the process of permitting the 6 applications that we have, and that policy should be out by the end of this year or early spring, and if to resolve some of the other issues, and will include a specific plan of development that we develop that will address all the needs that we have from the project performance, so they can give us a good plan of development for their application to be able to move forward with the project as quickly as possible.
And Stephen, I had you caught up with you on your presentation. I didn't sit up there first. yeah, but did you want to just complete that or more to briefs?
I think I covered in general a lot of the information. We are processing them under FLIPA, Federal Land Policy and Management Act. We are not minerally snack authorizations. Everything from the pipeline on up is under that process. Some of the issues that we have to deal with are cost recovery, bonding, and rentals. The big issue is rentals because it's really new process. We have not been able to. We haven't come up with a set rental policy yet. One thing the BLM has been doing over the last 2.5 years is we work very closely with Department of Energy, with Executive Office of the President, and a number of other agencies, EPA and others, to have an interagency process. DOE is bringing together a group of various agency members to talk about the evaluation process for carbon sequestration. And that would be in Wyoming in November, and we're very active in that process. I am the staff member that I've assigned to carbon sequestration, have calls on a weekly basis with Department of Energy and at least every 2 weeks with the Executive Office of the President in all related specifically to carbon sequestration. So we've been quite very proactive and active in that. In most cases, most RMPs that allow rightfully allow carbon sequestration, so we don't have problems with that. And as I said, BLM wants to be a proactive member of the community with regards to carbon sequestration. We see it as a benefit to the country and to the communities where these facilities are in place, because it brings in a new business, it brings in new jobs, things like that. Very interested in one of the things that BLM does is we have a pre-application process that we work with applicants, and as spoken earlier, we're very in tune to community engagement. For one thing, BLM has over 100 field offices, many like most small communities. So we're part of those communities. We know the people in those communities. We interact with them. Our kids go to those same community schools, and we want to bring things that can help those communities. And one of the things is bringing new businesses, create new jobs. One of the companies that has applications in a couple of different states just did a program in Louisiana working with local high school to bring basically a trade school type class into the school system where they're going to develop and train the young people in that community, which is a very economically depressed area, how to do welding and things like that will be needed in some of the community, some of the jobs related to the carbon sequestration project. So we encourage the people that come with applications to get out into the communities, meet with them, talk with them, and find ways they can interact if they can get the community to be proactive with them. As a lot of that stuff, the plan to develop things like that, I've already mentioned. We try to work very integrate the process from the headquarters on down to the field office. And we work talking to our proponents on a regular basis. That's one thing I think BLM has always done. Some of you've heard of FAST 41, which is a process to try to speed up the permitting process. Whenever I first saw that back in, I think it was 2018, the first thing I said is that taking the BLM process, because BLM has always been trying to integrate good community interaction, bringing all the proponent and all the various agencies involved in the process to have an interagency process, and that's what much as we can to interact with each other. We try to do the same process.
Thank you very much. I didn't realize I had, scared Director Parfit to such a degree that I just took him right out of his presentation. So I'm actually going to circle it back with apologies. And Director Parfit, I believe you can have a presentation and some slides. And a reminder, be sure and hit the button so it comes on green ones.
Thank you, Randall. One thing that I have learned to do in this position is be adaptable. So, all right. So I'll backtrack a bit here. But one of the things that I wanted to point out here that's quite often is that Wyoming is all of the above approach to development. And we take that approach, fully recognize that all sources of energy, whether it's wind or solar, coal, or gas, hydrogen, nuclear, they all come at a cost to achieve. The point here is that there is no free lunch. There is no solo boat here. At what's the right mix of all of these options. So a key component of all of this, all of the above approach, is the implementation of carbon capture and sequestration. And this is done through our Class 6 underground injection control program. One of the things that I did want to point out, because I think it's critically important, I don't want to miss the opportunity here, is that the most important element of our success in moving this program forward has been our staff. And we have tremendous staff at DEQ. They're committed and passionate about the work they do, and that includes our water quality division administrator, Jennifer Sigmund, and our groundwater protection manager, Lou Garco. But both Jennifer and Lily have demonstrated outstanding leadership, and were the key drivers in the success we've realized as an agency related to the Class 6 UIC program. And then I just wanted to also put Lily on the spotlight for a second. Just point out that she's one of 6 Wyoming representatives appointed by the White House Council on Environmental Quality to serve on a task force regarding responsible development and deployment of carbon capture. So, in many respects, the states of Wyoming and North Dakota are ahead of the federal government. And the reason for this is from an implementation standpoint. States are typically ahead of the federal government because the states implement 95% of all the federal programs. So that would make sense. Right now, Wyoming has 3 UIC, Class 6 UIC permits in public notice. And then we have 2 others that are in-house under review. And we project another 20 applications in the coming year. So, what are some of the reasons why it's important? I talked a little bit about this. Is that for Wyoming to have primacy, large factors at Wyoming. So that's true about Dakota and other states as well, than other states that have federal agencies. And as I mentioned, we've had Class 1 through Class 5 program primacy in the states since 1983. So we have a lot of experience in as does the oil and gas commission on how to do these types of projects. A few observations and challenges that I'd share with you. An observation, this is from the Energy Information Authority. CO2 emissions in Wyoming have been reduced from the peak of 2013 to 2021 by 1%. And then in 2021, CO2 annual emissions are the lowest they've been since 1980. From a national perspective, CO2 emission reductions in the U.S. The 2021 and 2021 that's set that's available. But 2021 CO2 annual emissions in the United States was the lowest since 1980. So from the peak emissions nationally in 2007 to 5,000 metric tons has been reduced. Today's emissions 2021 was 4,911 million metric tons. So that's an increase. Those are significant numbers. Of course, you heard this earlier from Assistant Secretary Crabtree. The Inflation Reduction Act, and those numbers, 45 tax incentives actually has had the effect of decreasing interest in sequestration. Now, the challenges that we face as a state is Western states is there's a lot of federal surface ownership. Wyoming and the federal surface ownership is around 47%. The key there is that triggers NEPA analysis. What we've seen is that NEPA actions take on average about 4.5 years. 25% of those NEPA actions take more than 6 years. We've seen projects here in Wyoming for wind or transmission that have taken up to 15 years. That's half of some of those. That's something that really needs to be looked at. So I know that lots of discussions currently to try to improve that process. But right now, that causes delays in meeting the desired outcome of net zero. So often overlooked or not understood by federal agencies is the impact of not only federal lands, but also factors that we deal with such as sage-grouse and ensuring that those sensitive species don't are necessarily become. So there's a lot of factors that Western states have to take into consideration as they implementing rules or proposing rules. And the example that I'll share with you is the power plant 1.0. A lot of the factors that were laid out in the power plant by EPA did take into consideration sage-grouse. So they had projected that there was 116 square kilometers available for weekend. But when you took migration corridors and sage grouse and things like that dropped down to about 16,000 square kilometers. So it has a significant impact on planning decisions. I'll just mention one of the challenges right now with their power plant 2.0. That's and again, I think there are similar issues with the power plant 2.0. But most importantly is that if you read the Clean Power Plant 2.0, you'll see that carbon capture and storage is talked about and made available in the power plant 2.0. However, because of the timing requirements in carbon sequestration, really easy. And so that's a really big challenge there, and we'll continue the dialogue on that. You heard a little bit about the right of way light with the BLM. This is one of those chicken and egg things, which comes first in Class 6 permit, right of way authorization from the BLM. And that's something where we're having some ongoing discussions about that, trying to solve that issue. We'll mention that there is the draft Rock Springs Resource Management Plan, but the inclusion of so areas of critical environmental concern. But this also is problematic because it takes protection. And then just a few more points here. So federal regulations are silent on interstate pore space. This is going to be an important topic as we have projects that are close to either state or tribal boundaries. So that's going to take some coordination with state and federal partners to find a solution. So let me close on a positive note. There is strong interest in carbon capture and storage and CCUS projects. That's primarily due to we have suitable geologic formations. We have climate sea carbon, and there are 45 tax credits. And most importantly, is that we're fortunate to have strong leadership and support of the governor. And through his leadership, we have strong support of the legislature to ensure that we have the staff and resources necessary.
Thank you, Todd. That was well worth waiting for. And my apologies. Matt Brice, I believe you also actually have a presentation, correct? Yeah.
Randall's not lying. He's keeping us on our toes.
So, I think I've had too much caffeine or something.
So yeah, I just had a few opening remarks. Just kind of wanted to give an overview of the importance of CCUS and then talk through a few of the challenges and then like Todd handled it off. So my first slide, I'm a nerd in this space. I love this slide because it kind of does a good job, or it does a really good job of describing the challenges that we face for climate, addressing climate change. There is no one solution. We're going to have to deploy all these technologies, and as you can see from this chart, we're going to have to do it at a pretty large scale to achieve climate goals. This chart's actually a little old at this point. It's from 2020. I think we could argue that 2C may be optimistic at this point based on the trajectory of project deployment. Now, a little bit, and we've heard a little bit about that. But what I wanted to point out here is, CCUS is extremely important in this technology, and because if we don't utilize CCUS, it's going to cost a lot more money, and therefore going to take us a lot longer to achieve our climate objectives. So just a few of the challenges that we face to deploy these technologies. A lot of these have been mentioned, so I'll move on pretty quickly in the interest of time. states in general don't have statutory frameworks that allow for deployment of projects. In Wyoming, we're advantaged because we do have a strong statutory framework, but many states, not most of the states, just don't have the ability to attract investment in these projects. We actually work with Hara, University of Wyoming, built a GIS mapping software that shows what states have developed for our statute and which are more attractive for the projects. We beat on the Class 6 program pretty hard this morning, but so I think that I should add on to it. My numbers are 144 applications, so I think my numbers are about a week before Brad's. But either way, there's a lot of project or applications that are being pushed through or made through one process. The challenge we see is they're going into applications that have been approved in the industry program. We see a lot of yellow dots on this map. They're focused in states with primacy in Louisiana, which is we hope soon achieve primacy. I guess I'll leave it at that. The process of Class 6 well authorizations is a huge hurdle to meet work with these projects. Also mentioned federal land. We talked about federal lands already, but federal land surface is roughly 1/3 managed and owned by the federal government. As we talked about, we don't necessarily have procedural opportunities to move forward with these projects at some point, but if we're going to develop at scale necessary to meet our climate objectives, we need to utilize this federal space. And then as Brad talked a lot about, and I think that we're all seeing right now, these are just screenshots of some articles that we've seen in the news over the past few weeks. The public perception of carbon management, generally speaking, isn't great right now. It doesn't necessarily focus on a particular class. It doesn't necessarily focus on any particular group or labor industry or anything. Just we're not winning the battle of public perception, and until we do, through education and other means, we're going to have those challenges to point these projects at scale. So not to be totally gloom and doom, Brad already touched on the IRA and the infrastructure laws. I won't get into that. Roughly $20 million worth of incentives to help deploy these projects, to build some sort of financing bridge to make them more financially feasible to move forward. That would be the numbers. But the last thing I'll talk about, and this is kind of a shameless plug, but I'll talk about it anyway, is there's opportunities beyond removal of CO2 associated with carbon capture, retrofits on industrial and thermal facilities. As you go through the pre-treatment, we're able to enter into a saving, and a means solution for carbon capture. You have to reduce pollutants such as NOx, SOx, and particulate matter. Those are processes that allow for substantial reductions in pollutants, which allow for substantial increases in health benefits. So this report kind of quantifies that at a level of removal CO2. And thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, you're most welcome since you prepared it and everything. Tara, let me first ask, do you have a presentation? All right, but please take whatever time you would like and talk about Tara's actually been involved in this process for a long time, looks at it from an academic, legal point of view. It's been a great source of information of just where we are in this space. So please take it away.
All right, thanks, Randall. And it's been such so much fun and such a privilege to work on these issues with the state and with the team we have at the School of Energy Resources that is led by Director Dr. Kirkpath, who's in the back. And so much of what I'm going to talk about today comes out of the great team-based approach that we have. So I wanted to kind of start by maybe amplifying a few of the themes that I've heard already today that I think are so important, and starting with Governor Gordon, really talking about the link, which is undeniable and has existed for all time between energy and economic development. You don't have one without the other, and over the past 150 years, that's meant emissions also meant economic development. But I think what this initiative is saying is that that doesn't have to be the case. We can have emissions-free, energy-driven economic development. And that's something that the state has really been working to bring forward. And then, as Assistant Secretary Crabtree said, the IRA is pushing that forward in a way that we really haven't ever seen before. I would argue that the IRA is opening up frontiers in low carbon energy development in the same way that the land disposition laws of the late 19th and early 20th century opened up the frontier for fuel, food, and fiber in the West. That is what sort of created the modern West, and I think it's what's going to create the West that we're becoming. And one of the reasons that I'm really excited about this initiative is that there are so many opportunities for state leadership in this. Not only to sort of pave the way and demonstrate technology in the West for the nation, but also for the rest of the world that is going to need to adopt and rely on these technologies. So this is a place where Western innovation and American innovation can really lead. States have such an important role here. We've talked a lot about the IRA, 45Q incentives. Those are federal. Class 6, which is federally driven. But most of what I work on, and I'm a dirt lawyer, I work on the sequestration piece and moving dirt and putting CO2 in the ground. That's a matter of the state, right? States cite CO2 pipelines. States control when eminent domain can be used, whether that's available for surface facilities and right-of-ways, whether that's going to be available for pore space. For example, if utilities who have normally exercised broad condemnation rights are required to put in CCUS as part of the new 111D rules, well, they need to be able to exercise condemnation authority in order to do that. States also shape property law, and we've done so much already here in Wyoming around this. Director Parfit talked about defining ownership of pore space. We have some of the first laws which were ever put in place for unitization of pore space units, which allow amalgamation of property, because the Class 6 regulations require control over a very broad area. That's something that's not required by Class 2. And so to deal with land fragmentation, resource fragmentation, regulatory fragmentation, we need to be able to amalgamate these interests. That's not only within a state and within a project, but sometimes it's going to be in interstate projects to address transboundary migrations, indirect migration of CO2 plumes and indirect migration of pressures. So this is an area where there's opportunities for cooperation between states to look at ways to address this. My colleague, Maddie Lewis, recently published a paper on this in Oil and Gas and Energy Law, a journal which has a great analysis of some of these things. And then also in determining sort of the scope and issues in balancing those trade-offs for land and water. That's also something that has traditionally been the provenance of the state. And so, I think we look at the opportunities there are for state leadership and policy making in this area, and then cooperation with our neighbors regionally on regional projects and regional policies that are congruous to allow projects to move forward, and then working together with federal agencies so that the federal lands that define so much of the West can be part of these projects is just a very exciting opportunity that's before everyone right now. So very happy to be a part of that.
Thank you very much. And thank God once more the panelists. As you look forward, I think we all like to say, this is great, this is marvelous, we're just about there. But let's talk about something else. What should be fixed? If there was one or two things in the area that each of you work on, that you see as being problematic, that is actually hindering the ability for companies, for states, for the federal government to provide an adequate sequestration program. And I plan to go in reverse order, so there's your warning. Hara, would you like to take that first? Yeah.
That's not a lot of warning. But that means that I get to pick all the low-hanging fruit. So I'll start by saying aquifer exemptions. You can get aquifer exemptions for Class 2 well. Director Parker will be much more of an expert on this, as will Lily than I am. But we're injecting CO2 into the ground already with aquifer exemptions, and they're not currently available for Class 6 wells. I think that's an arbitrary distinction based not on the risk profile, but on how the CO2 is being used, whether we're disposing of it as a waste or whether we're disposing of it for storage. That would be something that would immediately open up a lot more area for potential subsurface storage if there were solutions there. And then again, figuring out how to use federal lands in the subsurface, addressing those NEPA questions, figuring out how to do the valuations. I'm excited to work with you, Stephen, on some of those things, and so that we can be issuing right-of-ways, not just BLM lands, but this is also going to be Forest Service lands, Department of Defense lands, Army Corps of Engineers. There's such a mix of management and administration of federal lands in the West, and so having policies that work across the board, I think, would be really helpful, particularly in like the checkerboard West.
Thank you. So, Matt, you have twice as much time to prepare. What isn't working? What would you like to see change?
I think foundationally the country has a problem with education on these issues. I don't think that the majority of our population understands what happens when you turn on a light switch. They don't know what happens from the point of that gas well to the point it burns on your stove. They don't know what happens from the coal-fired power plant to the time you turn on the light switch. And that provides a real challenge for us because we get a lot of discussion about, well, if we just did this, things would be better. If we just did that, things would be better. But if they really understood the complexity of our energy systems, it would be a lot easier, I think, to have the stakeholder engagements in these conversations that we need to make projects move forward. So my basic point is we need an education program from the ground up so our public actually understand how complex our energy systems are, so then we can move forward with addressing the challenge.
Thank you, Matt. Steve, back down on the end. I particularly enjoy picking on the federal government whenever I can. Again, you already heard some. There might be some conflicts about which comes first. Class 6 or the rights of way, and I talked a little bit about the difference in federal regulation. But here's your chance to say, hey, this is how I would make this process better.
So one of the things that was brought up was the conflict between chicken and egg. Class 6 or the right of way permitting. And that's one of the areas where we need to have better coordination, and they're all working on that. Trying to work with the states that have pilocy with the EPA with regards to which comes first and how we deal with it. EPA approves the permit, but it's the BLM's lands that have to be managed, and there's a if the EPA permits a well, but it's in an area where the BLM can't authorize it because of laws and regulations, it doesn't do any good. So there needs to be a good coordination between the different agencies. Like I said, we're trying to work on that. I know with regards to Wyoming, BLM Wyoming State Office is working with Wyoming, BLM as a whole, EPA. I just recently attended a meeting in Pittsburgh with a number of federal agencies in attendance at that, including EPA. We had a specific meeting that was just federal agencies talking with EPA and about needs. So we're working in both, but it's one of those things that takes some time and coordination. I don't think that the states can't pharmaceutical projects go into place, and the BLM have different goals. You just have to different processes, and you have to work through those in some cases. I think as a whole, some of the problems that may exist are a reluctance, or not necessarily a reluctance, not understanding the process really well by some agencies. Because DLM is involved with the oil fields, not as nervous about wells and stuff being put into the ground because we've managed that for decades. It's some agencies are nervous about how that might affect their ongoing management of the lands that they manage. We're working with other agencies to help them understand why DLM feels it's a good process and connecting with developing a good relationship with those other agencies. There are sometimes tensions within DLM itself about potential for impacts that some projects may have, but I think you're dealing with those reasonably well. You do have concerns about people coming in with grand ideas, but not really having project specifics. I went through the early days of solar and wind. I was managing the lands out in Arizona. We managed about 1.5 million acres of public land in the field office. Then between 2007 and 2008, I had 13 applications of applied for that covered 800,000 of those 1.5 million acres. About half of those, the land that was left of that 1.5 was in wilderness, so we couldn't have gotten applications. So basically, about 3/4 of the lands we managed that were open to solar, we had applications on, and of those, only one wound up being approved of those. A lot of companies that came in were coming in not specifically for their project, but see if they could get a hold in that and basically lock up the land so they can make money by selling the land that they locked up, their project. And we have a fear that that's going to happen, or in some cases maybe happening in some of the projects and working as part of our policy that we're developing. We hope the issue soon will address some of those issues because we don't want land tied up by somebody that is not interested in really putting a project in. And so we're working on that. I think that's some of the only issues that I see.
Thank you very much. And now the one who had the most time to prepare, this ought to be good.
I agree. So yeah, I don't know that I could pick out just one single. I agree with all the comments that have been made. Obviously, exemptions are important. I guess if I had a key, I would say messaging. This is the education piece. But there's the pushback that they want to keep all the fossil fuels around. To achieve our overall goals, we have to have that all approach, but we have to have a messaging to those that may not agree with the capture storage versus CCUS as a path forward. So that would be one. The other, I guess, important one would be the scale and pace of renewables. That really is taxing on all the state agencies that deal with it's a bandwidth and resource issue, not just for Wyoming, but all states. What I would say is target the rules that are giving the biggest bang for effort and slow the pace down, focus in on programs that are successful. Have too many, it's spread too thin, and you have a lot of projects. Well, that's
Any questions from the audience? Or I may dive into mine. Yes, there's one. It's a good thing you can run the ITC. That's all I'm-
Thank you. Jim Ford, part-time Campbell County Commissioner, full-time Integrated Test Center Operations Manager. This is, I guess, an observation and a question. The federal policy, federal funding mechanisms, federal agencies, state statutes, state regulation are very well represented in all this conversation. I want to ask a question from the perspective of local governance, from economic development, diversification efforts, and social license at the local level. What can we do to be good partners at the community level for everything that happens as these big ideas trickle down to specific projects, specific places? What can we do to help get projects across the finish line?
I think that's a Matt answer, right? I saw the interest.
I can give it a shot. I think that, and I'll use the example of the pipelines in the Midwest. I think there's the opportunity at the local government level for some pre-planning work to be done, outreach to landowners, potential opportunities for pathways of least resistance to develop projects. It comes at a cost, but I think the benefits would likely outweigh the cost. I know when I worked on the project, the pipeline corridors here in Wyoming, that's the first thing we did is we went and talked to the county commissioners wherever we would propose a line for the corridor to go just to get an idea, a temperature of what the challenges may be, what the potential landowner challenges may be. So not just in Wyoming, but around the country, honestly, I think those local governments have a more established understanding and relationship with their neighbors, have the opportunities to be real project champions to allow us to build up this infrastructure.
And Jared, looks like you might.
I think another thing is that we heard from Assistant Secretary Crabtree is about the importance of community benefit plans and community benefit planning in pursuing these applications for demonstration projects, for DOE funding. And so, I think that there's a great opportunity for communities to be upfront even earlier in the process, not only with preparing letters of support for applications, but starting to work through the details of what are those workforce development plans going to look like? How are these projects going to be investing in the community? And putting that into enforceable agreements at the application stage, I think really will carry things forward and advance social license as well.
Any other questions?
So I might expand on maybe where you asked, Jim. Sorry, I am Brenda Schladweiler. I've done environmental consulting in this state for a long time, and feel like I can say this because I work around the state. I'm amazed how many people do not know the benefit of energy even in our own state. The comment I think you made, Matt, about the flipping the light switch, there's people in our own state that put two and two together on that one. So I think education, it's kind of come around to this discussion, and I think that's really important. When the energy or the assistant secretary talked about that things needed to be done before the engineering designs were done, I think that's really important. I think sometimes in the federal NEPA process, Stephen, you see so much public involvement at the end and don't see it at the scope part of things. And so I guess my question, and this could be anybody on the panel is how do you get the average Joe citizen to be not only educated but involved? Because really we're kind of the choir here. So how do you get the average person educated and involved?
As I said, we have 100 and some field offices across the United States. Some do a better job of getting engagement and involvement in the communities than others. It's the independence part of BLM. We are not centrally managed, so that leads to some inconsistencies. I'm a South Louisiana kid. I grew up, we were a community. We had street dances, everybody knew everybody. And I take that same attitude, I've taken that same attitude in projects I work with. And I try to teach that to various field specialists that I work with on occasions. And that's one place where the communities can work together with the BLM. Because developing those good relationships with the local BLM office, and whenever a project comes in, have ideas about what people in the community would like, what the company can do to help the community, that community engagement part. We're trying to be around, get our individual field officers to understand the importance of the pre-application meeting and then early involved. So proponents, a lot of proponents talk to DC before they talk to the local communities or local BLM. And we always tell them it's the early engagement, get engaged with the communities. Very imperative, as I mentioned earlier, that project is very imperative for the company rooms and look at the community, saw their needs. It's a low-income community, had press business models in the community. And they came in, worked with the local union, the builder union, and developed a program within the school where they were actually had a class that was specifically set up and funded by the company that was giving training on jobs that helped their business, being able to start back to construct, because they understand something before they get down to that spot, pointed back to construction, so they have time to grow those students. But it was teaching them trades that once that project was completed, these students would still have those trades, like welding. I like welding. My father was a welder, like this. They don't have those trades that they can use for other jobs. And each community, that may not be what a community needs, but there may be something in that community that the company can provide the community, that the community can get behind it like, and give them the buy-in from the community so the project can be developed within that community. But it comes, like you said, from engagement. Sometimes we do a good job of it, sometimes we don't. But anything that the local community, the local government, if they want to bring these companies in, help those companies understand that they're not getting it from BLM, help companies to get that engagement with BLM and push the BLM to do it.
Brought more interest. Tara.
I think there's two main points I want to make. First, I think we're doing a lot of work in outreach, and for that, I want to highlight two examples. SCR recently put together a pamphlet which is called "What Every Wyoming Landowner Needs to Know About Carbon Capture and Sequestration." I think we have copies of it here. No, we don't. But it is on our website. But one of the important things, looking at you, Commissioner, is for, I think, a trusted source of information are people like extension educators and county commissioners, and they can do so much in terms of like trust brokering and sharing information. I also think it needs to start way earlier. And so numerous professors in the School of Energy have created elementary, middle school, and high school education curriculums, which are available to any educator who wants them on carbon capture and storage and other decarbonization technologies. So we can bring education on this into classrooms that meet and are aligned with our state learning standards for every level. And then I think the last thing I really wanted to highlight is in a project we just did with INL, we were asking people what they cared most about for increasing public perception. And this goes against the narrative, but the thing they cared least about was engagement processes. And I think that doesn't mean that people don't want engagement. It's that talk by itself is cheap. People don't want to just be engaged with if it doesn't result in tangible increases in value to the community. And the values that we heard that people were looking for are lower residential electric rates and state and local job increases. And so, those engagement processes need to not only identify what are local interests, but then also adapt projects so that those benefits are tangibly realized at the local level. So I think that's another thing that's really important.
Thank you. Matt, did you want to one more on that? And then we do have time for one more question, or I get to do a lightning round.
Just real quick to add to that point, thanks, Brendan. I think that to actually engage with the public, you need a safe environment. Lots of these folks are not educated and don't understand the technology, so they feel uncomfortable coming into the situations and asking their questions just out of fear of ignorance, if nothing else. The other challenge is people have jobs, people have families, they can't necessarily walk away from those. Just spent months in Louisiana working on a project, traveling around the state, doing engagement with communities there, and to get people to come, we had to offer a stipend. It's not necessarily palatable to the government to do something like that, but there needs to be some opportunity beyond a cup of coffee and a donut to come out and talk about these issues.
Please, Director Park.
Ask questions. We'd have to do the lady.
Randall, we do have our last question right over here. That was Sean G, Milestone Carbon. We're a CCS developer and operator. First, thanks, Mark, for bringing everyone here because I got to sleep in bed last night. It's rare for me. And sparing everyone Randall's lightning rounds. Probably more for Matt and Tara, but in line with what Jim was talking about as well. How big is the economic development prize? And I think about it all the time, but it's really not just decarbonizing existing assets. What we're seeing, our projects, our world, it's actually becoming a exciting enabler for new projects, new industry, new jobs. And for the broader audience, would love your input on this. How big is this prize? What it means to areas that are willing to get ahead and develop pore spaces, CCS projects, and push the decarbonizing boulder up.
Okay, thanks for that question. I think in terms of local benefits, there are a lot of opportunities for especially jobs during the construction phase. I think it provides a lot of direct financial benefit to landowners. It's another economic use of land, and it's one that doesn't diminish sort of the production value of surface resources. Those can still be used for oil and gas in some cases, for wind, for grazing or agriculture. And then on the bigger picture things, I think there's an opportunity to develop new industries. We're seeing that around DAC and around hydrogen that are focused on decarbonization itself and carbon removal as a service, not as sort of a operations cost to reduce carbon. But for industries that are decarbonizing, more and more policies are coming in place that then will create opportunities for new markets and open up markets for low carbon products. We see things already with the carbon border adjustment mechanism in Europe. We see more and more attention on scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. And so suppliers who can then move into that space with the decarbonized product are going to be able to increase their market share relative to competitors who aren't decarbonizing, both in the US but also globally.
Not much to add. At GPI, we've done a number of analysis on what the potential job and economic benefits are associated with CCUS. We started in the mid-continent. I think I've got 5 more analyses coming out over the next 6 to 8 years to kind of help quantify what those job and economic benefits are. The challenge is that you build out jobs, as Tara mentioned, during the construction phase and for maintenance operations are lesser. So we need to account for that. The other challenge is we do quantitative studies on job benefits. It's hard to figure out what the job loss transition is on the other side of the spectrum. So those are things to consider. Also, I would like to say that we have a tremendous opportunity here to build a market. Like we built a market out of the oil and gas industry. We have the opportunity to do that and to figure out how to generate revenue from the injection, storage, capture of CO2. We're not there yet. We're actually heavily dependent on federal incentives to build this out. But I'm hopeful that that's the bridge to actually build out an economic, viable market similar to what we did with the local industry 20 years ago.
All right, thank you all. I think I've been given officially the hook, but I want to thank the panelists in particular for taking the time. As this process is designed, WGA will be putting together recommendations, very on a technical level, but it doesn't necessarily have how deep we move forward with decarbonizing the West. So panelists, please feel free to add in as the process goes on, members of the audience as well. But audience, if you'd join me in giving our panelists a great big hand.